Question, real estate in California. What the Seriously, can someone help? What's an escrow? What's an ARM? What is an REO? What is pre-approval? Can I get pre-approval? Why is inventory so low? Why are interest rates so high? Oh, interest rates not so high? How low is low? How not so high is right.
Before you go down the road of questions, get expert help at championsofhome.com. California Association of Realtors. Who's your realtor?
I'm Jenna Fisher.
And I'm Angela Kinsey.
And we have the podcast Office Ladies. Every Wednesday, we'll be sharing even more exclusive stories and lots of laughs.
Follow and listen to Office Ladies on the free Odyssey app and wherever you get your podcasts.
They always said the heat in that town made people mean. Dale Dresden was born into it. Into a place where the air sat heavy on your shoulders and the days stretched long enough for bad ideas to take root. The town didn't have much to offer beyond a church, a gas station, and a row of tired storefronts with hand-painted signs fading under the sun. Everyone knew everyone, which meant there was nowhere to hide and nothing to become that had already been decided for you. Dale never had a mother. Not really. As to what happened to her, well, that depends on who you ask. His father, when he was around, worked odd jobs out past the county line and drank whatever he earned before stumbling home. Most nights the house stayed dark and quiet, and Dale learned early on how to take care of himself. Or, rather, how not to. And then, his father was gone, just like his mom. With no one to answer to, he grew up feral in the way small towns sometimes produce. He ran with boys who liked to break things just to hear the sound. Mailboxes, bottles, the occasional window if the night felt bold enough. They'd sneak onto farmland, scatter livestock, siphon gas from parked trucks. It started small, the kind of mischief people blamed on boys being boys. But Dale never seemed to stop where the others did. He had a temper that came quick and left slow. Teachers tried to manage him until they didn't. Shopkeepers learned to watch him closely. The sheriff learned his name before Dale turned 12. And by 16, Dale Dresden had been hauled into the county station more times than anyone could easily count. Petty theft, vandalism, drunk and disorderly. Each time he came out a little harder, a little quieter, like something inside of him was being shaped instead of corrected. The law wasn't something he feared. It was something he studied, learned the edges of, and tested, routinely. There's a particular kind of resentment that grows when a town decides what you are before you've decided it for yourself. Dale wore that resentment like a second skin. If they were going to call him trouble, he figured he might as well be the worst version of it. And eventually he was. It happened on a night that carried the same thick heat as any other, the kind that made tempers short and judgment even shorter. By morning, Dale Dresden's name wasn't just something the sheriff muttered with irritation. It was something spoken carefully, quietly, behind closed doors. Aggravated assault, that's what they called it. The bar sat at the edge of town like something that had been dragged there and left to rot. It didn't carry a proper name anymore. Just a flickering sign and a bad reputation. A low roof sagged over warped beams and the windows were too dark to see through, even in daylight. Inside, the place survived on cheap Red Dog beer and an unspoken agreement that whatever happened within those walls stayed buried there. Conversations kept low, eyes kept forward, and the few who didn't understand that rule rarely came back to learn it twice. Dale Dresden stepped inside that night with Trish close at his side. She didn't belong in a place like that. It showed in the way she held herself, and the way her eyes searched the room as though looking for something familiar and finding none. Still, she stayed near him, her shoulder brushing his arm now and then, as if proximity alone might offer some measure of safety. Dale drank, but not heavily, not enough to dull himself. If anything, there was a clarity to him that night, a quiet sharpness. He watched more than he spoke, sat still longer than usual. Kind of stillness that didn't read as calm so much as contained. It happened quickly. Jeremiah moved past them at the bar, his shoulder catching Trish just hard enough to send her drink spilling down the front of her dress. The glass slipped from her hand and struck the floor. The sound swallowed almost instantly by the room. Beer soaked into her shoes. She let out a small, startled breath. Jeremiah didn't stop, didn't turn. He didn't apologize. He simply kept walking. Dale watched him go. There was a moment, brief enough that most wouldn't have noticed it, where nothing happened at all. Trish reached for Dale's arm and said his name softly, trying to pull him back to her, to the present, to something smaller than the insult that had just passed between them. Dale did not respond. His eyes stayed fixed on Jeremiah's back as the man disappeared down the narrow hallway leading to the bathrooms. Then Dale moved. It wasn't sudden, there was no burst of anger, no sharp motion that drew attention. He simply stepped away from the bar and followed, his pace measured and certain. Trish called after him once, then again, a little louder. A few people glanced over, but most turned back just as quickly. This wasn't a place for intervention. Whatever business had just begun, it was understood to be private. For a few seconds, the bar carried on as if nothing had changed. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loudly at something not quite funny. A chair scraped against the floor. Then the first sound came. A dull, heavy impact. Another followed. Then another, closer together now, building into something unmistakable. The rhythm of it unsettled the room before anyone had even named it. Conversations faltered, heads turned, people listened. There was no shouting. No argument. Just the sound of violence already in progress. The bartender moved first, coming around the corner with a look that suggested he already knew what he would find. The bouncer was just behind him, and a handful of patrons followed, drawn less by courage than by the sheer insistence of the noise. When the bathroom door swung open, it struck the wall hard enough to echo. It took the bartender, the bouncer, and 3 others to pull Dale off of Jeremiah. Even then, it wasn't a simple thing. Dale didn't lash out at them, didn't curse or struggle in the way a man normally would when being restrained. He didn't even seem to acknowledge them at first. He just kept moving forward, as though the interruption hadn't reached him yet, as though stopping was not a decision he had been given the ability to make. They dragged him back by force, his boots scraping against the tile before his body finally gave way under the weight of enough hands. His knuckles were split open, slick with blood. His shirt clung dark against his chest, his breathing, though, remained steady. Unchanged. Jeremiah lay crumpled on the floor, barely conscious, his face already swelling into something distorted and unrecognizable. And in that moment, the room understood the true weight of what had happened. Not just the violence, but who it had been done to. Jeremiah was not simply another man in a bar, he was the son of Reverend Elijah Cade, a name that carried its own gravity in a town like this. A name that sat at the center of Sunday mornings and funeral processions and every moral line the town pretended it never crossed. In a place like that, the Reverend's son was as close to untouchable as a man could be. By morning, the story had already spread. By afternoon, it had taken on its official shape. Aggravated assault. Sheriff Stewart did not expect much when Dale was brought in. He had seen boys like him before, boys who tested limits until they found one that finally held. Boys who lied when it suited them and forgot when it didn't. He sat across from Dale in a cramped office that smelled faintly of dust and tobacco, lit a cigarette, and waited. Dale's account, when it came, was thin to the point of absence. He remembered the bar, he remembered the drink spilling. He remembered the man walking away. And then there was nothing. No pursuit, no confrontation, no bathroom. Just a clean break, as if that portion of the night had been removed entirely. The next thing he knew, he was sitting in a jail cell. Sheriff Stewart watched him carefully as he spoke. There was no slur in his voice, no haze in his eyes. If this was a lie, it was a remarkably controlled one. Still, the explanation fit too neatly into what the sheriff already believed about him. Either Dale was lying, or he had been too drunk to remember. It was, in its own way, ordinary, until Trish spoke. She did not argue with what had happened. She did not try to soften it or redirect it. If anything, she seemed unsettled by how little there was to say about the violence itself, as though the beating was not the part of the night that lingered with her. Sheriff Stewart let her talk until she fell quiet. Only then did she mention that there was something else. Something she had not known how to explain at first. She told him the last clear moment she held onto was calling after Dale as he walked toward the hallway. He had not answered, had not slowed. But just before he disappeared from view, he passed beneath one of the overhead lights. And for a brief second, he turned his head. Not fully, just enough. Trish hesitated there, her hands tightening together as though bracing against the memory. When she continued, her voice had changed. She said Dale did not look drunk, he did not look angry. He did not in any meaningful way look like himself. There was something off in the way his body moved, subtle but unmistakable once it was seen. His posture seemed too deliberate, too controlled in places where it should have been natural, and too stiff in others, as though the motion had been learned rather than lived. And his eyes. That was where her composure faltered. She said they did not track the way they should have, that when he shifted his gaze, there was a delay. Slight but present, as though whatever guided his sight operated a fraction of a second ahead of the body that was carrying it. But what unsettled her most was not the movement, it was the feeling. Because when he looked back at her, just for that second beneath the light, she was certain of one thing. He had seen her, and whatever was looking through him had made a quiet, immediate decision. She did not matter. Sheriff Stewart did not concern himself with the finer details of what Dale Dresden claimed to remember. He had heard enough stories in that office to know how they worked. Memory became convenient when it needed to be, and blank when it did not. Whether Dale was lying outright or simply hiding behind a fog of his own making did not interest him nearly as much as the outcome. A line had been crossed, and not just any line. In Stewart's mind, that alone settled the matter. There was a place for men like Dale. Graymore State Penitentiary sat less than 2 hours outside of town, though it felt farther in every sense that mattered. It was the kind of institution spoken about in lowered voices, not because of anything official, but because of what people understood it to be. It was where difficult men were sent when the system grew tired of managing them, where the noise of their lives could be absorbed by the thick walls and forgotten routines. Sheriff Stewart had seen enough come back from there, what few did come back at all, to know it did not correct the man so much as finish him. He found that fitting. What he did not find fitting, what sat near the top of a long and personal list of irritations, was the obligation to entertain a public defender in cases such as this. It struck him as a formality stretched well past the point of usefulness, a performance in which one man pretended there was still something left to argue, while the other waited for the inevitable conclusion to finally catch up. And when he heard that Dale had told the man the same story, the same empty, convenient lapse, his patience wore thinner still. The public defender introduced himself as Andrew Fields. He was a tall man, though the impression was softened by the way he carried himself. Slightly hunched at the shoulders, as though years spent leaning over desks and files had left a permanent mark. His suit was clean but worn at the seams, the fabric thinning in places that suggested long use rather than neglect. A narrow tie sat neatly against his shirt, and his hair, dark with streaks of early gray, combed back with quiet precision. There was a carefulness to him, not just in appearance but in movement, as if he believed that composure itself could be a form of persuasion. Wireframe glasses rested on his face, and behind them his eyes moved with a steady, deliberate attention that Sheriff Stewart found immediately tiresome. They sat across one another in the sheriff's office, the same stale air hanging between them, the same desk dividing the space into sides that had already been decided. Fields placed a folder down in front of him, opening it with a measured care. "I've just come from speaking with Dale Dresden." Sheriff Stewart leaned back into his chair, one hand resting loosely near the ashtray. "Then you've heard his story?" "I have, Sheriff." "And?" Fields glanced down briefly as though aligning his thoughts before continuing. "He maintains that he does not remember anything after the initial encounter at the bar." Sheriff Stewart let out a quiet breath through his nose. "That's what he told me." "He was sober when I spoke to him, Sheriff," Fields added. "Then that's even more reason for him to remember beating on that boy." Fields did not react outwardly, though something in his posture shifted, a subtle straightening that suggested he had expected the response and prepared for it. "That would be the assumption, yes, Sheriff," he said evenly. "But I do not believe that he is lying." The word settled into the room with a weight that felt almost misplaced. Sheriff Stewart studied him for a moment, as though deciding whether that statement deserved a response or dismissal. "You don't believe he's lying?" Sheriff said. "No, I do not," Fields told him. Sheriff Stewart leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms onto the desk as he fixed Andrew Fields with a look that had worn down better men than him. "You don't believe he's lying," the sheriff said again, slower this time, as though the words themselves needed to be examined for weakness. "You're telling me a boy with a record like this, a temper like his, and a history of pushing every boundary this town has, just so happens to forget the one moment that finally puts him where he belongs?" Fields did not rush to answer. He let the question sit, not out of hesitation, but out of a kind of discipline that seemed practiced. When he spoke, his voice remained even, though there was a firmness beneath it now that had not been there before. "I'm telling you that the absence isn't behaving like a lie. There's a difference between someone avoiding a truth and someone unable to reach it. Dale is not redirecting. He isn't minimizing what happened. He is not reshaping what occurred to make himself look better. If anything, he seems disturbed by the gap of memory." Sheriff Stewart let out a short, humorless laugh and leaned back into his chair, the wood creaking faintly under the shift. "Disturbed," Sheriff said, mockingly. "That's a generous way of putting it." "It's an accurate one, Sheriff," Fields replied. Stewart shook his head, reaching for a cigarette and tapping it once against the edge of the ashtray before lighting it. The flame briefly illuminated the lines in his face, deepening them, before he drew in a slow breath and let the smoke drift upward between them. "You spend enough time in this chair," Sheriff said, gesturing faintly around the room with the cigarette. "You hear every version of disturbed there is. Men get real thoughtful about their circumstances the second they realize they're not walking out the same door that they came in through." Fields watched him unblinking. "And you spend enough time assuming you already know the ending. You stop recognizing when something doesn't fit the story you've decided to tell." That earned him a pause. Not long, but long enough to register. Sheriff Stewart narrowed his eyes slightly, studying the man across from him with a new kind of attention, as though reassessing not just his argument, but his resolve. "You think this is different?" "I think it might be," Fields answered. The sheriff leaned forward again, slower now, the earlier edge in his voice settling into something more deliberate, more controlled. "Let me be clear with you, Mr. Fields. I don't care what he claims to remember. I don't care what kind of performance he puts on in that cell. I have a man in a hospital bed who may or may not walk right again, and I have a dozen witnesses who pulled your client off of him while he was still swinging." Fields nodded once. "I'm aware, Sheriff." "Well, good. Sheriff said. Then you understand why I'm not inclined to entertain the idea that he just blacked out and woke up somewhere inconvenient. Fields' fingers rested lightly against the folder in front of him, tapping once softly before stilling again. Sheriff, he said, I've been doing this long enough to know what a lie looks like when it's being built. There are tells, inconsistencies, small shifts in language and posture and timing. People protect themselves instinctively, even when they're trying not to. And you didn't see any of that? Sheriff said. No, Sheriff, Fields replied. What I saw was someone trying to reach something that is not there. Sheriff exhaled slowly through his nose, the cigarette lowering slightly in his hand. Or someone who's practiced enough to make it look that way. Fields shook his head. That would require intention, planning, a level of control that doesn't match the man you've described to me. Stewart's mouth tightened faintly at that. Don't confuse lack of discipline with lack of instinct, Mr. Fields. Boys like Dale Dresden learn real quick when it comes to saving their own skin. And yet, Fields said, leaning forward just slightly now, his voice still calm but carrying more weight. He isn't trying to save it in any meaningful way. He is not denying what happened. He is not blaming anyone else. He is not even asking what he's being charged with beyond the surface of it. He is fixated on the absence itself. Sheriff said nothing. Fields held his gaze. And there's something else, Sheriff, he added after a moment. Stewart's eyes flicked toward him, unimpressed. Oh, I'm sure there is, Mr. Fields. Fields did not rise to it. And then he spoke. He asked me if it was possible for a man to do something without being the one who decided to do it. That drew a faint, incredulous sound from the sheriff, somewhere between a scoff and a laugh. Oh, so that's what we're doing now, is it, Mr. Fields? Philosophy? I didn't answer him, Fields continued, as though the interruption hadn't come. Because I wanted to hear how he framed it. He didn't say he lost control. He didn't say he snapped. He said it felt like something had taken a hold of him. Sheriff Stewart leaned back again, the chair creaking again under him, his expression flattening into something colder. Of course he did, Sheriff said. Talk to him again, Sheriff. I already have, Mr. Fields. Not as a suspect, Fields said. As a man. Look at him. Listen to him. Tell me if you believe he understands what he did. I don't need to believe anything, Mr. Fields. I have evidence. Fields' voice remained steady, but there was something insistent beneath it now. Then humor me, Sheriff. Sit across from him, ask him to tell you what happened. And when he can't, when there's nothing there but that empty space, look into his eyes and tell me you see a man who's lying to you. Sheriff's gaze hardened. The room seemed to hold its breath for a moment, the quiet stretching just long enough to become uncomfortable. Because I've seen liars, Sheriff, and whatever is sitting in that cell of yours, it don't look like one.
Question. Real estate in California. What the Seriously, can someone help? What's an escrow? What's an ARM? What is an REO? What is pre-approval? Can I get pre-approval? Why is inventory so low? Why are interest rates so high? Oh, interest rates not so high? How low is low? How not so high is right.
Before you go down the road of questions, get expert help at championsofhome.com. California Association of Realtors. Who's your realtor?
By the time Andrew Fields was led back to the holding cells, the station had settled into that late afternoon lull where even the air seemed to move slower. Fields carried himself with a quiet professionalism that felt almost out of place in the building. His suit was dark and neatly pressed, though the cuffs showed the faint wear of long use. His hair was parted cleanly, held in place with more care than vanity, and a thin leather briefcase hung from his hand like an extension of habit rather than necessity. There was nothing showy about him, no theatrics, just a steady, deliberate presence, the kind of man who relied on patience more than force. The deputy unlocked the cell and stepped inside. Dale Dresden sat on the narrow bench inside, elbows resting on his knees, a cigarette burning low between his fingers. The smoke curled lazily upward, collecting in the stale air above him. He did not look up when Fields first entered. "Mr. Dresden?" Fields said, closing the distance just enough to be heard without raising his voice. "My name is Andrew Fields. I've been appointed to represent you." No response. Fields waited a moment, then reached into his coat and produced a cigarette of his own. "Mind if I join you, Mr. Dresden?" Dale gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. Fields struck a match, lit a cigarette, and took a slow drag before settling himself onto the bench across from him. For a time, neither man spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable so much as it was dense, like something sitting between them waiting to be acknowledged. Fields had learned not to rush these moments. In his line of work, silence often did more than questions ever could. "I've spoken with Sheriff Stewart," he said eventually, "and I'd like to hear things from your side." Dale took a drag from his cigarette, exhaled, and watched the smoke dissipate as if it were something worth studying. "I told him," Dale said at last, his voice low and steady. "Ain't nothing else to say." Fields nodded slightly. "You don't remember anything after the man bumped into your companion?" Dale shook his head. "You weren't drunk, Mr. Dresden?" "No." "Then help me understand what you think happened, Mr. Dresden." The question lingered longer than the others. Dale's cigarette burned down another inch before he spoke again. "You ever hear something so many times, you start thinking it ain't a story no more?" Fields didn't interrupt. Dale's eyes shifted, not toward Fields, but somewhere past him, as though the cell itself had faded and something older had taken its place. "My old man, Drew Dresden. You heard of him, Mr. Fields?" "I've heard the name," Fields replied carefully. Dale let out a faint breath that might have been a laugh if there had been any humor in it. "Yeah, most folks have heard of my daddy." He leaned back slightly against the wall, the cigarette hanging loose between his fingers now. "He come to me a couple of years back," Dale continued, "out of nowhere. Hadn't seen him in years before that. Thought maybe he'd finally drunk himself into a ditch somewhere and that'd be the end of it. I was behind Miller's feed store, cutting through, just minding my own business. And he steps out from behind the building like he'd been standing there waiting. Didn't hear him come up. Didn't hear nothing. Just there. He looked wrong. Not just rough. I'd seen him rough plenty of times. This was different. Eyes sunk in too deep. Skin like it didn't sit right in his face. Like he hadn't slept in days or weeks. And the way he looked at me, like he needed something from me. Like I was the last place he had to go. And then he grabbed me, hard. Pulled me real close like he thought I might run. Started talking before I could even say a word. He said, "I need you to listen, son. I need you to hear this and not walk away." I don't want to hear nothing from him. Man disappears on me, leaves me to rot, then shows up looking like that. I had a knife on me. Always did. Figured I might just end it right there. So I pulled it. Didn't think twice, went right at him. But he caught my wrist before I could even get close. Like he knew it was coming. Like he'd seen it already. Twisted the knife clean out of my hand and put me on my back before I could do a damn thing about it. And then he says something I ain't forgot since. He says, I know you want to kill me, son. But maybe the truth will make you want to kill someone else instead. And what truth would that be? Fields asked. Dale's gaze drifted again, pulled back into the memory whether he wanted it to or not. He started talking about that night. The night my ma disappeared. He said folks got it all wrong. Said they thought he'd done it, but couldn't prove it. Said they looked at him like they knew, but they didn't have nothing to hold him on. And then he says, I did do it, son. But it wasn't me. I told him that didn't make a lick of sense. So I asked him where she was, what'd he do with her? He just kept talking. So they went out for a drive, real late, just the two of them. Said it was supposed to be something nice, quiet. Took her up past the ridge road, out where the land flattens and there ain't nothing but fields and sky. You can see for miles out there, Mr. Fields. Ain't a light in sight once you get far enough. So they go on, parked up on a hill. He said the air was real still. Not a sound anywhere. No wind, no insects, nothing. Like the whole place had gone quiet just for them. He brought a bottle, so they poured it onto some glasses, talked, laughed, like everything was normal. And then he saw it. Said it was out in the field. Far enough you couldn't make out any details. Just a shape. Standing there, watching them. Didn't move. Didn't come closer, just stood there like it had all the time in the world. He told her about it. Said she couldn't see nothing. Said there wasn't nothing standing there. But he knew better. Said he could feel it. Like it wasn't just looking at them, it was waiting. Said they tried to shake it off. Raised their glasses, figured they'd head back soon. And then right as they were about to drink, he blacked out. Next thing he knew, he was waking up in a jail cell, blood all over him. But it wasn't my ma's blood. Fields frowned slightly, confused. The blood did not belong to your mother? Dale shook his head slowly. That's what he said. Said it didn't belong to her. Said she was just gone. He kept saying it don't make sense. Said that's why they couldn't pin it on him. No body, no proof. Just him covered in blood that shouldn't have been there. Fields watched him carefully now. And what did your father think happened, Mr. Dresden? Dale's eyes lifted again. This time there was something in them that hadn't been there before. Fear. He said something took a hold of him. Said it made him do something he couldn't remember. Something he couldn't explain. He said it wasn't over. Said it don't just happen once. Fields leaned forward slightly, his voice becoming softer. What else did your father say, Mr. Dresden? Dale reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately, as if the motion itself carried weight. He gave me this. From his pocket, he produced a worn, creased card and held it out. Fields took it. There was a name written on it, nothing more. Dale watched him read it. Said if it ever happened to me, if I ever felt that gap, that break in time, that this was the only man in the world who would believe me. Fields looked down at the card again and read the name within his own mind. Christoph Simons.
Question: real estate in California. What the Seriously, can someone help? What's an escrow? What's an ARM? What is an REO? What is pre-approval? Can I get pre-approval? Why is inventory so low? Why are interest rates so high? Oh, interest rates not so high? How low is low? How not so high is right.
Before you go down the road of questions, get expert help at championsofhome.com. California Association of Realtors. Who's your realtor?
From the trusted team behind 48 Hours, welcome to Case by Case, your weekly update on the biggest true crime stories unfolding right now.
Nick Reiner remains in custody without bail.
Luigi Mangione accused of stalking and gunning down United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson.
From high-profile trials and stunning evidence to major breaks in cold cases, we'll follow it all case by case. Follow and listen to 48 Hours Case by Case wherever you get your podcasts.
Sheriff Stewart did not go straight home. The road that led out past the edge of town stretched long and empty, cutting through fields that had long since given up trying to grow anything worthwhile. The sun had already begun its slow descent, bleeding out across the horizon in dull shades of amber and rust, the kind of light that flattened everything it touched. Stewart drove without urgency, one hand resting on the wheel, the other draped near the open window, cigarette burning low between his fingers. He passed his turn without acknowledging it. The cemetery sat a little farther out, tucked behind a line of aging trees that leaned inward, as though trying to keep the pace contained. The gate hung slightly crooked on its hinges, and the gravel path beyond it bore the marks of infrequent care. Stewart pulled in without ceremony, the tires crunching softly beneath him as he brought the car to a stop near the far edge. For a moment, he didn't move. The wind moved faintly through the trees, though it carried no real sound with it, just motion and presence. Stewart exhaled long and slow, and something in his posture gave way. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else could have noticed, but enough to suggest that whatever he carried with him into this place did not belong to the badge or the officer or the man people thought they knew. He stepped out of the car and closed the door behind him, the sound dull and final in the quiet. The walk was not long. He knew exactly where he was going. The gravestone sat near the back, slightly apart from the others, as though distance itself might offer some kind of dignity. The name etched into it matched his own. The dates beneath it were brief. Painfully so. Stewart lowered himself down in front of it, not with ceremony, but with familiarity. He rested his forearms against his knees, the cigarette still burning between his fingers as he looked at the stone. "Hello, son," he said. His voice carried easily in the still air, though there was no one else to hear it. "Sorry I ain't been around as much this month. Got a new case and all the puppet masters want to pull on my strings at once." He let out a faint breath, something close to a tired chuckle. "He's the son of a reverend, this one. Best not to keep God waiting, I suppose. I dreamt about you again the other night. You and your mother. Seems like my best dreams are during the day." "Makes sense. Night being for nightmares and all. The kitchen light flickered on the other night. For a moment I thought, that might be you, saying hello. All this nonsense about... Hell, I can't even say the name. What kind of monster has the name Boogie in it? Ain't that the dumbest thing you ever heard of, son?" Gravel shifted somewhere behind him. Stewart glanced over his shoulder as a man passed along the path, pushing a rusted wheelbarrow that rattled softly with each step. The groundskeeper moved at an unhurried pace, his frame bent slightly with age, but not weakness. His clothes were worn thin from years of sun and soil, his hands stained with the kind of work that didn't wash clean. There was a steadiness to him, though. A quiet familiarity with the place that made him seem less like a visitor and more like something rooted there. "Hey there, Sheriff," the man called, slowing as he drew closer. "Was wondering when I'd see you again." Stewart gave a small nod. "Hey there, Gus. How's business?" Gus let out a short breath, adjusting his grip on the wheelbarrow. Well, truth be told, Sheriff, it ain't never been better. Stewart's mouth pulled faintly at one corner. You don't say. Gus gave a small shrug, though there was no humor in it. Well, now, I hate to say it, Sheriff, but, well, you know better than anyone. It's been a big year for passing over. Oh, you're right about that, Gus. I do know. There was a brief silence between them, the kind that didn't require filling. All right then, Sheriff, Gus said after a moment, shifting the wheelbarrow forward again. Didn't mean to interrupt. Hey there, Gus, Stewart called, turning slightly. Gus paused, looking back at him. What's that, Sheriff? Stewart studied him for a second, weighing whether the question was worth asking at all. Let me ask you there. You believe in the boogeyman? Gus did not answer right away. He stood there for a moment, one hand resting on the handle of the wheelbarrow, his expression settling into something more thoughtful than the question seemed to deserve. The breeze moved faintly again, stirring the grass at their feet. Well, Sheriff, I've spent near half my life out here. Seen more folks laid in the ground than I could ever hope to remember. And I'll tell you this. You see enough of that. You stop thinking the world makes any sense. Any sense at all, Sheriff. Folks like pretending it do make sense. 'Cause that's how folks sleep. But Sheriff, I gotta tell you, since you're asking, who's to say the boogeyman ain't real too? Now, of course, in my family, we had a different name for him. Or, not so much him as it. Oh, yeah? What name would that be then, Gus? Gus held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary before he finally told Sheriff the name. Cuco.
We came in mud-stained coats through the side door scene, candles bent in jars like they knew the dream. The pews all leaned toward the same old grave. Mama pressed my hand, said, behave, behave. Hush now, hush now. Hear the boards complain. Hush now, call that holy name. Black River, take me slow. Black River, take me low. Black River, Black River, let me go. Black River, let me know. His ring was cold on the rusted rail. A moth kept circling round the tabernacle veil. Old men hummed soft with their eyes half shut, like they'd seen the end in a silver cup. Hush now, hear the floorboards groan. Hush now, we are not alone. Black River, take me slow. Black River, take me low. Black River, Black River, let me go. Black River.
Question: real estate in California. What the Seriously, can someone help? What's an escrow? What's an ARM? What is an REO? What is pre-approval? Can I get pre-approval? Why is inventory so low? Why are interest rates so high? Oh, interest rates not so high? How low is low? How not so high is right.
Before you go down the road of questions, get expert help at championsofhome.com. California Association of Realtors. Who's your realtor?
Life can feel overwhelming, but on my podcast, From the Heart with Rachel Braithen, we're in it together. Every Friday, a new episode brings you a new story with topics on motherhood, wellness, self-love, and more. Listen to From the Heart with Rachel Braithen wherever you get your podcasts.